Hello and welcome to the show. Now, 100 horsepower might not sound like a huge amount, certainly not compared to some of the vehicles that we will go racing with on Forza 7. However, that is all we had to play with when it came to building some cars for a race. They could have as much torque as you could get out of them, but limited to 100 horsepower, and the vehicles couldn't weigh less than 2,000 pounds. And they couldn't exceed E-Class, but in E-Class we could still get the vehicles pretty much fully upgraded with the engines at that 100 horsepower, and that meant the vehicles would be fitted all with race tyres, and that had some unexpected side effects. So our first race, we would head to the Virginia International Raceway using one of the very technical shortened layouts. The Holden Ute, not such a terrible choice here. While it is down in terms of PI, it gets the 100 horsepower and is still only slightly above the 2,000 pound weight limit. So yeah, it's not quite as uncompetitive, it's not as heavy as it might initially look. However, the issues for the Ute would be revolving around grip roll. One of the Hondas up ahead gets a good start, however runs wide across a curb, and that would spit the S800 sideways. Sylvia gets a position in all of that as well. As we head up towards this very technical section, that's where things start getting interesting for the Ute. There is so much grip from the race tyres, and the vehicle's so top heavy that it will want to go up onto its side, it'll want to roll up going around corners. But the Ute was nowhere near as bad as the Baja Racing Beetle. This was practically undrivable around the circuit, wanting to permanently go up onto two wheels and then getting a huge amount of understeer on two wheels, clonking the side of a Brat, and that would send the Baja bug over for a tumble. My Carmen gear would get stuck on the outside of all of that, and yeah, it wouldn't go so well for my car. However, a lot worse for the Baja bug, as that would plummet down to the back of the field. Of the kind of opening laps, the Fiestas didn't have a great sort of starting position, but they were pretty damn quick cars. In fact, one of the fastest vehicles in terms of straight line speed. Not quite sure where that speed comes from, and you wouldn't expect it, considering both these cars here would be running 100 horsepower. You wouldn't expect it to massively pull on the Opel. If anything, you'd expect the Opel, being a more streamlined shape, to be able to go faster, but the Opel GT did not have an answer for the Ford. Yeah, the Fiesta, something about the Fiesta makes it pretty damn decent when it comes to the straight line sections. It wasn't actually that bad through the corners, it had a lot of traffic to work through. The Ute was desperately trying to cling on to positions. It had good acceleration. Its top speed, though, was a bit lacking in comparison to its rivals' cars, like the Honda S800. In fact, the S800 wasn't the fastest. It wasn't as quick as the Silvias in a straight line. It did have good acceleration, though. The S800 did have its own issues. The grip roll wasn't ideal for the little Honda, and it was a big two-wheeled moment around that kind of first corner. Puts the Honda on the grass. It doesn't lose as much time as you might expect, but it's enough. And when you're in cars that are as low-powered as this, you need every little bit of momentum. The Honda tries to make it too wide down the S's, runs out of grip as across the grass, sort of skates his way through the second part of the corner. Everybody gets away with it. In fact, they keep going side by side, despite said Honda having been largely out of control and across the grass, and the Ute would just about make a position back as the Honda towards the grass. The Mini up ahead toward the grass. I think the Opel behind was out wide on that particular corner as well. The Mini lost all of its momentum and would drop back into this group, as we have now 5 cars fighting over what would be third place up towards the final turn. It would be the Ute that was holding on to third. The Honda's on the outside of a 3 wide. Not the place that you particularly want to be there, although it does get a good cutback for the exit of that turn. The Mini, I think, bowled its way across the curb. The Silvia had got 4th position in this group for now as they all run down towards turn 1. The Ford's got all of the speed and absolutely nowhere to use it because he was completely boxed in. I don't know whether the Honda didn't realise the Ford was there or just drifted across the circuit. Either way, the Fiesta got himself up the inside, however, then catches the group ahead still with nowhere to go. The Utes on 2 wheels once more. The Fiesta's doing some rallycross on the exit. The Opal's even further off the circuit. The Honda's going to try and get the position back. The Mini's trying to buy into all of this, but there's just not quite enough space, and you really don't want to be going 3 wide into this technical twisty section. The Ute, I'm pretty sure, was up on 2. Yep, Ute's still on 2 wheels all the way through this section. Sylvia not quite able to find a way past the flailing Ute. Unfortunately, it all ends in a little bit of disaster for the poor Mini and the Honda. The pair of them get sort of front bumpers locked, or front bumper locked to rear of another car that spits the Mini sideways. Honda waiting for that Mini to rejoin. All good fun and games in the mid-pack. Not so much fun for the poor Baja Bug that was still having huge drivability issues. Let's just try to take turn 1. It just doesn't turn in. It kind of turns in, has so much grip it goes up on 2 wheels and then loses all grip, and then it falls over at other points around the circuit. Life was not so good for that poor Baja Bug. I think it went over 2 or 3 times before the end of the race. It's incredibly difficult to drive. My Carmen Gear, also not a good vehicle. Not a good vehicle at all here. At Virginia, it was having big 2-wheeled problems. Not as noticeable and not quite as terrifying as the Baja Bug, but it was making it very difficult to drive through some of the longer corners. Combine those with its lack in terms of any real speed elsewhere, life wasn't good in the Carmen Gear. The Volkswagens weren't having a fun time, that is for sure. Although, speaking of grip roll, the leader in the S800 had to go and outdo all of us for how far could you get a car on its side without it falling over. That was a very long way for the S800, admittedly assisted by attacking that inside curb quite heavily. But it cost him the lead of the race. The Silvia would move up a position, and while the Honda was perhaps a little bit quicker car through the corners, the inconsistency with its wanting to go up onto its side made it quite difficult to make lap speed. The Ute was still doing a fantastic job, desperately clinging on to that 3rd place as it was coming under fire from a Silvia, and the Fiesta was getting involved as well. I was impressed. I did build up a Ute for this and quickly changed my mind against using it. I wasn't expecting it to be at all a standard chance in any way, shape or form, but the Ute was doing pretty bloody well. The Silvia asked too much of his car, trying to go around the outside of the Holden, and would end up touring the grass and lose a whole heap of positions. The Ute still trying his best to fend off that Fiesta. In the end, while the Holden had a bit of acceleration, could fend it off to the line, if you like. Once it got past that, the Fiesta just had too much speed, and the Holden, very little that it could do about, like, it's so far back when it comes to the braking zone. And you know, let's not forget here that these aren't going particularly fast by the time you get to the braking zones. You're going to not be on the brakes for a huge amount of time. At the front of the race, as they came round on the final lap, it was one of the Silvias that was leading the way, coming under increasing pressure from the Honda, but no real place for the Honda to find a way past. And the Baja Bug would go down a lap because it had tumbled over again. The poor Baja Bug was not having a great time, but yeah, the Honda was, I think, the quicker of the 2 cars, but inconsistency with its want to roll over, and the Silvia having a slightly higher top speed was enough for the Nissan to take a victory. The Honda in second. Third would go to the Fiesta. Fantastic drive from the Holden to get that 4th place. No one expected to see the Holden do so well. As second race would go to the Rio Mini Circuit, a very slow getaway for one of the Fords. I also stalled the Carmen Gear for a second time. For a second race, the Carmen Gear did not like getting going off the line. I think the Beetle ended up getting squashed against the Armco barrier. So, once more, not great times for the Volkswagens. The Baja Bug didn't make its appearance here. Instead, we had a Ford Woody that was far too heavy. It was under 100 horsepower, but far too heavy to be competitive, and said Ford would plummet through the order in this one. The rest of the cars were trying to fit 3 or 4 vehicles into the final hairpin. I mean, yeah, these are not going massively quick. You might be able to get away with 2 and 3 wide in places you wouldn't normally, but 4 wide? asking quite a lot of cars at a very, very small circuit, but they were continuing to try it down towards the first corner. In the end, the Holden gets a slight tag in the braking zone, sort of fires it across the pack. There's bumping, there's paint swapping going on at this point in the race and at this group in the field, but it didn't really matter too much on the most part. Yeah, you were getting away with the odd tap and the odd bump here and there. Everybody was going relatively slowly. It was exciting being stuck in the middle of these groups, or for me, in the background, kind of exciting watching the groups unfold as we're up to the final hairpin once more, with everybody being too wide, basically, through that section. Not so much excitement at the front of the field. The Honda S800s had got to the lead, and with Rio not quite having the same sort of corners to exacerbate the grip roll issues, these two got to the front and then ran away. Nobody had the pace to keep up with the S800s, and they weren't hindered by the inconsistency that had plagued them at Virginia. None of their other cars stood a real chance of catching up to the pair of them. The Golf in third would gradually drop back. I think the Opel was up in fourth. So yeah, they just didn't stand a chance of keeping with the Hondas. My Carmen gear was better at Rio, thankfully. Again, the lack of grip roll issues around here certainly did help. The brakes were also very good on the Carmen gear. I was able to have a big dive on a Beetle to get the pass done at the final corner. Still, even here, you see my car wanting to go up onto its side ever so slightly. And while better, still not exactly great. Struggling just for overall pace. So I'm fending off from the Beetle as we go through turn one. Up ahead, Sylvia and Fiesta are going side by side for the large part, if not entire laps here. And even with them going side by side, I can't keep up. They're battling each other so hard, and you're losing so much time when you're racing. Well, I say when you are side by side an entire lap, you lose an awful lot of lap speed compared to what you could be doing. And even with them doing that, the Carmen gear couldn't really keep up. It wasn't my greatest choice of vehicle. The only place it was good was into that final hairpin. It did have very, very good brakes into the final hairpin. While the lead two would bugger off on their own, third place would be an interesting fight. The Opel, Volkswagen, and Mini would be in this particular group. A different selection of cars, if you like, found themselves fighting over this third place. Certainly, of course, you find yourself in a little bit of clear air. You can get away from a battle briefly. It will help here because you would spend entire laps stuck side by side with cars. It made the racing very, very exciting. Trying to carve your way through the field was very difficult, but yeah, you could often spend entire laps going side by side. In this particular case, the Mini did a good job to move up past the Volkswagen, get the pass completed to move into fourth. At the front, the two Hondas had closed up. The white car looking for a way past. Not the easiest track to overtake around here. Your main area is going to be into the final corner. You can't do a huge amount through a lot of these other turns. It's sort of simple, flat-out stuff as the two Hondas are banging doors ever so slightly. The white car goes very, very late on the brakes. It's a big, big dive to try and make sure that he gets the position. It's a good cutback attempt from the red car, but it's just a little bit too far back to really do anything about that pass. So yeah, the Hondas would swap places, but even with them fighting, the rest of us didn't stand a chance of catching up. The Ute wasn't doing quite so well. Around here, struggling more for pace. Sylvia tried to get a pass done, ended up clonking the side of the Ute. The Sylvia coming off much worse. I was up in this group. We were fighting for the lower positions, the lower parts of the field, but I was in a battle at least with the Carmen gear, so was having more fun than running around on your own at Virginia. I took a big dive up the inside of the Holden. I don't think he quite realised how good the brakes were on the Carmen gear. I ended up scraping the wall on the inside a little bit. We all got away. No real harm done as we head down towards the first corner. I didn't expect the Ute to be able to have the grip, to be able to carry the speed around the outside of the Volkswagen, and he would get the position. I was left the door a little bit too far open for the Sylvia, and I get some grip roll. I'll get my car slightly up on two wheels. That doesn't really help my case, as the Nissan would want to find a way past. But even considering I was up on my side on the way out of that corner, still managed to kind of match the Sylvia for speed, but stuck on the outside at the final hairpin. Haven't got the kind of composure with the Carbon gear. If I chuck it in too hard there, I know it will want to go up on its side and I'll lose so much speed, so I couldn't really fend off much against that Nissan. Third place battle still raged on with the Opel trying to fend off the Mini and the Volkswagen. The Ford Woody would end up a lap down. It really wasn't fast. Far too heavy in this field. The Mini briefly getting the position off the Opel and then can't get it stopped down into the first corner would see the Volkswagen kind of keep pace with his group. I think the Opel and Mini were perhaps a little bit faster than the Volkswagen, but as soon as they started fighting, it would put the Golf right back into the fight as they're continuing side by side. Again, the Mini spend almost an entire lap here side by side with the Opel in one form or another as they head round the final turn. This time the Mini not able to get the pass done, loses a little bit of time against the Opel, and that now puts the Mini side by side with a Volkswagen, although straight line speed of that little Mini was pretty decent around here. Still having to go the long way around turn one, can't quite do it. Mini actually gets a little bit of a wiggle on the way out of that corner, and again the Mini's swapped who he's side by side with through the course of a couple of laps, but has spent almost 2 laps side by side with somebody. In the end would actually lose out to the Volkswagen. At the front, though, the Hondas were, unmatched in this one. They remained close through the final stages of the race, but there would be no kind of attempts at change of position here, and the Opel that would end up in third certainly couldn't keep pace. It was an interesting race at Rio. A lot of fun in the mid-pack. Not so much fun if you were running around on your own, but you would spend laps stuck side by side racing with cars. Was good fun racing these 100 horsepower vehicles. It always is, and there is a much better selection than ever with racing them. Grip roll is a big problem that you've got to watch out for, certainly on the higher riding cars, things like the Ute and, of course, that Baja Bug. The Carbon gear also with problems. The Honda S800 Silvia, the Fiestas, and the Volkswagens and so on, they didn't have so many issues with the grip roll, but yeah, made for some excellent fun, if rather noisy. These cars make a lot of noise with their 100 horsepower racing. Overall, the Honda S800 was the car to go for. While it had a few inconsistencies at Virginia, it was still very quick there, and at Rio it was absolutely dominant. So in terms of the vehicles, the Honda S800 definitely the way to go. The Carbon gear, absolutely rubbish. I wouldn't recommend that one for this sort of racing. Don't know what it is. I don't know what it is about the engine. It's just not fast enough. It's not fast enough whatsoever. Decent, I say decent. Everything was 100 horsepower, had decent torque figures and so on, but just couldn't get any lap time out of the car. Struggling to keep up with the Ute. So, yeah, Carbon gear, not a recommendation. But that is going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.